Hi everybody, my name is Hannah Goward and this is my research project presentation. It's on how poverty affects student achievement and then lastly what we can do about it. So to start, we'll just introduce the topic of child poverty. So child poverty affects 15 million children, that's 21% of America's students that live in poverty. The poverty threshold defines poverty for a family of three as $20,780 a year. And I found in my research that in order to qualify for Great Start Readiness programs and Head Start, it requires a maximum income of $20,420 a year. So a family of three cannot make more than this $20,420 in order to be qualified for GSRP and Head Start. So they're making less than the federal poverty threshold in order to be qualified for federally funded free preschool programs. So that leaves a huge number of youth that can't afford to go to preschools. 26% of families can't afford care for their children. This is from infancy until pre-K. And the Economic Institute said that it costs about the same as 4 years of college. The average cost of infant care all the way through pre-K. Infant care costs like $10,000 a year, and pre-K costs $6,000 a year, and then prices vary in between. And then another statistic about a child in poverty. A 4-year-old in poverty hears 30 million less words than a middle-class 4-year-old. And as ECE professionals and students, we know that the amount of language a child hears the amount of language that a child hears as they're younger affects their language when they're older. So 30 million less words is a significant number. So here's just a graph. This one right here I want to focus on the effect of mother's speech on vocabulary in 2-year-olds. So this gray line right here is a child in poverty, and the light gray line is middle class. So a middle class 2-year-old knows about 800 words, whereas a low class 2-year-old knows about 200 words. So that's very, very significant. And then I have this graph right here that just shows like the differences in geographic location. So the orange is present day. I think it's actually like 2016, and the light is 1969, just to show the differences. How child poverty affects the brain. There's differences in brain structure, particularly in areas of the brain that deal with language, reading, executive functioning, and spatial skills. This focuses from the hippocampus and the cortical thickness and also the amygdala. The hippocampus size, I read in a medical journal about scientists who focused on how parents' education and income affect brain size. And they found that the hippocampus size is related to parent education. So the lower the parent education, the lower the hippocampus size. And then the lower the income level, the lower the cortical thickness. Now these factors can lead to childhood stress, which comes in the form of toxic and chronic. These are the two detrimental stresses to a child's health. They affect the emotional center and take a physical and mental toll. It also affects physical, psychological, emotional, and cognitive functioning, which makes a child struggle with coping skills, and then sometimes they have severe behavior and academic problems. So it affects student achievement because they're struggling with behavior in the classroom. So poverty has been shown to decrease the size of the hippocampus and amygdala, which help regulate stress and emotional processing. Student achievement, we'll just give a quick definition that I found. Education Evolving uses this as their definition of student achievement. Students are achieving when they acquire the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that will prepare them to lead happy and successful lives. Basic skills in language arts and math are critically important, especially for elementary students, but are not sufficient. They are building blocks, a starting place for moving to other higher order dimensions of achievement. So Education Evolving is a organization that is advocating for better measures of achievement, quality schools, and individualizing assessments. Because how can you they're saying that how can you measure a student's success based on these things when everybody starts in a different place? Not everybody's learning levels are the same, especially for children in poverty. Children in poverty begin school with less knowledge, less language, and less like life experience. So that affects their achievement when we take into account all of these things and measure it up to the same standards as we do middle class children, for example. So this graph is kind of just to show a huge disparity in incomes. So I just want to focus here on the less than $40,000. Remember that like this right here is the poverty line. So children are scoring negative 60. So like they're falling below, this is the average here. They're falling way below on their writing, reading, and math skills. And then when you come over here to the opposite end of the spectrum, they're scoring way above average. And then you have your 60 to 80,000s that are falling directly on the average. So measures of achievement, we have standardized testing, projects, and papers. As early childhood educators, future early childhood educators, we know that standardized testings aren't necessarily fair and or a good way of assessing a child. Um, so a child in poverty, just to put in perspective, comes into kindergarten with so much less knowledge that scientists say that they're about 2.5 years behind their peers. So standardized testing is going to be an unfair assessment of their learning because they're already so far behind that how can you assess them based on where everyone else is at, you know? Projects, children in poverty probably won't be able to do projects because they're going to lack the resources to do it, or the energy because they're malnourished. Papers, they already have low reading and writing skills. So papers will be difficult. They also might not have the resources to do those either. Um, it's also very common that low-income students attend low-income schools because low-income schools are in high-poverty areas, and this perpetuates low academic achievement because those schools lack resources, money, teachers, and safety. So school becomes a stressful environment. Home is a stressful environment. So dropout rates are way higher. There's low attendance. There's obviously low academic achievement. So in reality, a lot of children in poverty are victims of the schools that they are forced to attend based on where they live. Now, what we can do about child poverty affecting student achievement, we can advocate. We need to advocate for more funding for high poverty schools, for fair and comprehensive measures of achievement that are more individualistic. We need to take into account the circumstances and backgrounds of each child, and then we'll find that more students are succeeding just in their own way. And then more support for impoverished students. So in our classrooms, if you have a child that you know is in poverty or that you see as malnourished or stressed or whatever the case may be, we need more support in the classroom for those children. And then lastly, but most importantly, we need to change our mindset. So a lot of times teachers have this fixed mindset that nothing will ever change and things just are the way they are. They have to work around it instead of work with it. But we need to have growth mindset, which sees potential and works towards it. I read a journal about this high school principal who worked in a high poverty school, and she forced all of her staff to go to these growth mindset training seminars, and they lived that out in their classrooms, and they found that it inspired their children to do better. So their high poverty schools were slowly creeping up to the national standard because they changed their mindset. So you change your mindset, you change your world, so to speak. And then I found this quote right on the side that I thought was really nice. This is coming from like a child's perspective, something we need to ingrain in the children that we work with, that they can achieve anything as long as they put in the effort, as long as we give them the right strategies to use, and then help them through failures and mistakes. And then one quote that I'm going to end with that was really significant in my paper. It says, the primary factor in student motivation and achievement isn't the student's home environment, it's the school and the teacher. That's from Eric Jensen. So just a closing thought for all of us future educators, that we are the primary factor. We make the difference. So yeah, thank you for listening, and hope you learned a little bit about how poverty affects student achievement.